and welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. As usual, I'm your host, Mary Ann Dersch. I work with nonprofit leaders to master the art of influence so they can ask for and receive all they want, need, and deserve without feeling rejected, ineffective, or pushy. And who wants to feel that? That's so that no one wants to feel that. And I'm here with Julie Boll, and I've known you, Julie, for I feel like a long time.
Yeah.
And watch you and your business grow. And Julie, we're going to talk about like building trust in your nonprofit organization and how important that is and how critical it is to strategic planning, to the internal functioning of your nonprofit.
Yes.
And Julie is a Dare to Lead facilitator, and you teach nonprofit professionals how to lead and live more courageously. I like that, using the Dare to Lead framework developed by Dr. Brene Brown. And I love that you're bringing all this to nonprofits because I feel like we need it the most. So thank you for being here.
We do. Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right. So we were just chatting for a bit because there's a lot of alignment in what we do. As far as you were our grant writer. That's how you started your business.
Yes.
I've been working with organizations on marketing and messaging, and we realized there was like something missing, right? There was pieces of this that the strategy that we were helping implement didn't address. So I would love to hear from, how you came into the realization that, hey, the strategic planning, there needs to be more, there's something missing in the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did start in grant development, and towards the end of my career in grants, I was getting into multi-million-dollar grants. And the whole point was like, we want to help nonprofits do more and do amazing things and affect change. And what I was seeing is even with these big dollar amounts, you don't necessarily have that change. You have the same people in the systems that are making the same decisions. So it was kind of a realization for me. It's about the people that run the organizations more than it is about, pumping money in or even doing strategy work, like you said. Mm-hmm. So when I realized that the Brene Brown Dare to Lead work was available for organizations, it really hit home for me that, we need to do this work for ourselves so then we can be more effective as organizations and better serve our people.
So even with the money pumping in, right, it wasn't fixing what they are making the change they wanted to change. The real change needed to be the people.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And what attracted you to the Dare to Lead program?
So I've been a super fan for years. And when I became self-employed, I needed to make that jump to self-employment and immediately support myself. So it wasn't like a little pet project or a little side thing I was doing. I needed it. And so it was a terrifying experience. So I really had Brene in my ear the whole time, coaching me through it with her work. And so I found out that she was training people to facilitate her work. And I just said yes. And I really said yes before I realized exactly what was involved. But it was just sign me up. I want to meet her. I want to be part of her organization and do her work. And it's just been amazing.
And so that's really great because I mentioned, and I talk about this a lot, the medicine and the cure, right? And so the cure was like, oh my God, sign me up. Right? Like people will swallow any medicine if the cure is strong enough. And so in our marketing and messaging, we focus on the outcome, the cure, because we were like, I don't know what it is, but I want it. It's like a nonprofit. Like, I'm not sure what you do, but I know I want to be a part of it.
Exactly.
It's that powerful. And so I'm glad you jumped in. And I also can empathize with, just sort of, hey, I'm going to do this. And it is pretty scary. And I think you have to be embody that. Like you have to have your own challenges and your own obstacles so you can come in full alignment. You know what I mean? With others. Like I get you. I understand. It was scary for me too.
Yes.
What do you feel like some of the biggest issues are inside nonprofit organizations?
So the reason, and I'll sort of answer the question slightly different. The reason I think this work is so important for nonprofits is we have to be having hard conversations, and we think that we're nice in nonprofits and we're all about what's best for everyone. Yes, that's absolutely true. But there's going to be some real value conflict type of conversations where you have this dynamic between stewarding resources from an affluent group for an underserved group, and you are going to have conflicts that have to be navigated. And I just really think that this courage building, the work you do, all of this work is super important to make sure that we can have those conversations, and we are having those conversations, because if we don't, people leave, they don't stay.
People leave. In my own life, I learned, and I was to say, I didn't have to learn. I had the opportunity to learn the value of conflict, right? Because I was putting peace on a pedestal, and this is with my son, my middle son, and like I wanted to create, and by putting peace on a pedestal and sacrificing everything for peace, I was actually creating more conflict, because sooner or later that pedestal is going to fall, right? And then boom, now conflict, like a teeter-totter goes bam. And so creating that balance of peace and conflict, and just honoring that conflict is a part of our life, and having what I would call meaningful conversations, right? Is a part. And I love what you said, that is especially a part of the nonprofit, where we are dealing with very critical issues in our world. And so the ability to have that. And I also see, like you said, and I work with a lot of people who want to be nice. And they are sacrificing, they're sacrificing honesty for kindness, because they just they don't know how to do it, right? They don't know how to do it.
And it's hard.
It is. It can be hard. And because we are kind people, right? We are in this business to be kind people. And so, and I do feel like people would rather leave than have a difficult conversation.
Right.
I'll just go somewhere else. I'll just or we don't want to disappoint someone, or we don't want to make someone mad, or
right. Exactly. And those of us, I've been a nonprofit for 20 years. So I always felt that I would stay in this space. So I've either worked in it or I consulted for nonprofits. And I have just seen too many conversations avoided that needed to be had. And when your leader won't confront something and won't have a conversation, it lets you down as an employee too, as another member of that team, that we need to address this thing, whatever this, elephant in the room is, it needs to be talked about.
And for some reason, they're just unable to have that discussion. And then there's like disappointment, and then a lack of trust. Right. And absolutely. So that's what I feel like the work you do is. So how do you, what happens? I guess we've already kind of covered that. I would say, what happens when we don't have trust? But I feel like we've already maybe covered that. But is there anything else you want to say about that?
Well, just when we do the workshop, so we do this Dare to Lead work, Brené's work in a workshop, and we'll just paint the picture of what, if you just recall what the experience is like when you work with someone you don't trust, and you use some words to describe it. I don't know what comes up for you. Sometimes it's scary, stressful, frustrating, and you contrast that with the words that come up when you think of somebody that you trust implicitly and that you work with. And it's easy, empowering, productive, peaceful. So you look at the two of those side by side and say, there's no way that we're going to get the outcomes that we want in that work environment that is frustrating, scary, or stressful. There's so much resistance there. So yeah, absolutely. To not have trust is incredibly detrimental.
One of the biggest things that I've learned, that I have embraced through the coaches and the guides that I have, is energy is everything.
Yes.
Frequency first. Energy is everything. And by the energy by which you create guides and determines the creation. My coach, Michelle, says this all the time, right? So, the energy from which we create, and we tend to kind of like, oh, no, let that, we'll plow through, or we'll ignore it, or, but so creating that energy and then creating trust, instead of saying, okay, hey, I have this strategic plan. Let's make a plan. And then that'll help us trust each other. And that typically doesn't work, because it's really not addressing the issues. So, hey, let's learn to trust each other. And from that place of ease, grace, flow, all this stuff you talked about, we create a plan from that. Imagine how much more powerful that plan will be, right? Because it is coming from all of those places, like ease and grace and productivity and like how I talk about ease, grace and ease and flow, when you're in the
Yes.
flow, and that
Yes.
comes from that foundation of trust. And
Yes.
like you, that's what I saw was missing, right? Like, because hey, I can give you any great marketing message in the world, but if you
Yes.
all don't trust each other, don't trust the value of your relationship, don't, what I mean? Like don't, aren't willing to like, don't, are feeling uncomfortable about like being more visible and being more seen, it's not going to work. The best
Right.
marketing in the world, right? So,
Yes.
hey, let's work on standing in your value. Let's work on creating trust, creating power and possibility, and from then we do the marketing. Imagine how different
Yes.
it would be. And
Yes.
and I think
Yes.
that's why I love what you do. And I feel like there's such an opportunity for so many organizations to really rethink and tap into some of this, like, I don't call it prep work, but more like internal work, right? Of the
Yes.
mindset. Um, so, what are some of the things that people do to either create more trust or erode trust? What does that look like? Because I want to kind of tap into, like, we talk about how it feels. Now let's talk about like what it looks like.
Yes. So that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the Dare to Lead work. There's frameworks here that we can use to lean into this concept. And so I want to share this framework called Braving, BRAVING. It's
Okay.
called Braving Trust. And I just want to briefly go through it.
Sure.
Because what Brene essentially shares with us is that trust is built in the smallest of moments. So it's like the marble jar. It's not like an all or nothing. You either trust me or you don't. It's behavior patterns over time that we can use to build trust. So the good news is you can rebuild trust in organizations and in relationships, and that's what we need. But when we use this Braving acronym, which I'll unpack real quickly, it allows us to dial down into very specific things that we can change. It gives us power back instead of, we don't trust each other, end of story. So what it stands for is the B stands for boundaries. And so if you think of it like kind of like a self-assessment, I respect professional boundaries. And when I'm not clear about what's okay, I ask.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to say no and ask for what I need. So when we have a self-assessment that we'll do in the workshop and say, pick that person in your workplace that you struggle to trust and kind of hold them in your mind and go through this Braving acronym and see, are you clear with your boundaries with this person? Because if you're not, then that can be something that can erode trust in the relationship. And that can be something that we can use to rebuild trust as well.
Girl, I'm loving this. This is the
Yeah.
big thing. Boundaries and agreements. We work on that a lot in my course and in my work. All right,
Yes.
let's keep going.
Boundaries, reliability. You say you do what you say you'll do. So, and that's such a clean, clear thing, but it also means that we have to acknowledge our competencies and our limitations. And sometimes we don't want to do that. And so when I did this Braving acronym self-assessment a couple of years ago, I had just become self-employed and I realized I wasn't actually reliable to my husband. And it was because I kept overpromising to my clients. And it was just really sort of sobering to realize what my part was in this eroding trust in the relationship.
Well, and the boundaries, creating better boundaries with your clients allows you to be more reliable.
Exactly. And not overpromising anymore. So reliability, accountability, I own my mistakes, apologize and make amends. I don't blame others for my mistakes. And when I need to hold others accountable, I do so honestly and with respect. So you can kind of assess that piece too for yourself. Are you doing that? And then you can also communicate with someone else. I've noticed that you are not reliable. You're not doing what you say you will do. And it drills it down into something really specific instead of this big, like, overarching trust, which makes you feel like a bad person if somebody doesn't trust you. V is for vault. It's confidentiality. Not only will I hold your information in confidence, I will not share anything with you that isn't mine to share. Huge piece of trust.
Mm-hmm. What was it? That was was it confidence?
V is for vault.
Oh, vault. Gotcha. Ooh, yeah. I love that. It goes in the vault. I have a friend, one of my best friends, and we both have adopted kids the same age. And so we hang out a lot together. And he says like, this goes in the vault. I'm like, got it.
Yes, yes, yes. And the one thing that's interesting is it's not only will my stuff remain safe, it's that you're not telling me something that isn't yours to share either.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's hard to trust somebody that even if they're keeping your confidences, if they're sharing something with you that isn't theirs to share, you're not going to trust
you're
them.
not going to trust them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Okay.
I is for integrity. So I love her definition of integrity. It's choosing courage over comfort and choosing what is right over what's fun, fast, or easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Choosing courage over comfort and choosing what is right over what is fast and easy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Love it. I'm taking notes as we go. All right.
Yes. This is good. It's such a helpful tool. It's such a helpful instrument. N is for non-judgment. So I can ask for what I need and I'm willing to ask for help. And the huge piece is I don't judge others for when they need to ask for help. If we aren't willing to ask for help, then we're sort of subconsciously judging others who are asking for help. So we have to be willing to do both.
And I want to say this is so important for fundraising and the receptivity of fundraising. And because if you don't like to ask for help, that's fundraising is like, hey, asking for someone to invest in your organization, it can feel like asking for help.
Yes.
And if you're not comfortable with that level, that partnership, I think there's an energy that can often undermine some of the fundraising. So I think it's important from a interpersonal level, but I also just think it's so important. And also from alignment, like, and I just want to tap into this just a little bit because in the nonprofit space, we really have two audiences. So you and we have our clients and the clients of us.
Yes.
Nonprofit world, you have your donors that you serve, and then you have your clients that you serve.
Yes.
So you want your clients to come and say, please, I need help.
Yes.
Right? Please, like, and because you're like, let us help you. But I'm not willing to ask for help. I don't, but you can. No, when I ask for help, then I'm embodying the change that I seek in them, right? I'm the model. It's like, oh no, that's okay for you, but not for me. No, I was coaching this group of a group of like veterans, and they have a mentorship program. And I asked them, how many of you have mentors? And they're like, no, because how much more powerful your leadership would be of this organization if you were in alignment, if you said, yeah, I'm open to help as well. Like and so that's why I'm a coach, right? I have a coach because I'm in alignment, right? I don't have it all. I don't have it all figured out. I'm doing the work, right? And so by being comfortable asking for help, first of all, you're giving people the power to be helpful, which is incredibly empowering for them.
Yes.
And also you're modeling you're making it okay. You know, you're like normalizing asking for help. It's okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's really good. All right.
It is huge piece of trust. Your leaders need to know that if you get in over your head, you will ask for help. And it's a skill and it's important. Yeah. So perfect.
And there's non-judgment in asking for help. Hey, I'm in over my head. I need some help. And they know that that there's not going to be a blowback from that. They like, thank you for coming to me. Let's figure this out, kind of thing.
Exactly.
My old job at 501 Creative, our president, Karen Handelman, she's still the president. Like, I know I could go and tell her anything. Hey, like this happened. And she'd go, okay, let's figure it out. And that allowed for you to be able to tell her anything. So we aren't hiding things, right, from people because you're like afraid to tell the truth.
Absolutely. So important.
All right. I think we're on G.
We are. Last letter, G, generosity. I can extend the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. And this is one, I think, boundaries and generosity is what is really easy to get tripped up. And so when you're doing that self-assessment and you're holding that person that you might be struggling to trust in mind, are you assuming the most generous intent of the words and actions of that person? And so often it's like, you want to make it their problem. Like, I don't trust you and it's your problem, but I'm also not necessarily being clear about what's okay and not okay, boundaries. and definitely struggling in the intentions, words, and actions, that whole generosity piece.
Right.
So yeah,
I mean,
huge.
it's that, like in the 4 agreements, the second agreement is don't take anything anybody else does personally.
Yeah.
It's just there, and that is an art, that is a skill that you can master. I used to be like super affected by what everybody did and said, and so I've learned. But I think the most generous like just like it's the benefit of the doubt. Give them
Yes.
just give them the
Yes.
give them grace. And like if somebody cancels a meeting, like hold on,
Yeah.
hold on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Most like,
Absolutely.
and let's just, I love that, the generosity of the interpretation. I know people aren't going to say it perfectly, right?
Right.
Yeah. They might not say it at the right time. They might not say it in the right way to get their message across, but you can still receive the intent of that message,
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And when we have low trust environments, we kind of default into really skeptical, negative behavior. We aren't necessarily assuming this generous intent anymore.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you is these are things that we can create and we can foster inside
Yes.
our organizations.
Yes.
So, and I'm thinking about, the group that I'm a part of, that I participate in, that I don't lead, I participate in, and how much we value trust, how much we value, we don't use this exact language, but there's a lot of things about like, you don't talk about anybody who's not in the room, like there's a lot that really create a high level of trust.
Yes.
In this group. And this is a model for me. And so I know it can be done. And then in my course and in the back end program, because after people take my course, they can take a year-long program. We work on a lot of these things is to create what I call the sacred container, so that people can feel comfortable like exploring these ideas, and you can be a model for that. So how do you work with organizations to create more trust, and like you do a workshop, and then what else do you do to help organizations create more trust inside in their relationships?
Yeah. So the first thing we do actually is work individually with individuals. So even I'll lead full organizations through Dare to Lead, but I'll say my first goal is self-awareness. And my first goal is for you to get something, deeply personal out of this before we apply it out. And when we do this braving work in the workshop, even if it's in an organization-wide workshop, we ask you to do a self-assessment, because then your first start, it's just so shocking and eye-opening when you take that super hard relationship that you're having some trouble trusting someone in the workplace, and you run it through this filter, this braving filter, and you assess yourself. Was I clear about what's okay and what's not okay, which is boundaries? Was I reliable? Was I da 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 da? All of a sudden, your whole perception changes of the relationship, and then you are leading by repairing trust. And then you have the ability to then communicate again if it's a reliability issue. Here's where we're strong. I really appreciate that you keep things in the vault and that you're so generous with me. What I'm noticing is that reliability is an issue. When you say you'll do something and you don't do it, that's where I would like to build trust. So at the one-on-one level is really where I spend the most time on it. But there is a tool called, it's a team trust tool, where you can assess your team on all of these elements and then really workshop around. I just went through an organization and we did this, and reliability came up as the huge outlier. For some reason, that was the one that people rated the lowest. And we opened up the conversation and said, okay, what's going on here? What are some things that we want to do and unpack and practice? So we can use the assessment, we can use the tool as an assessment as well.
Yeah. So after you work with organizations, what do you see? How are they different from doing this?
They are bolder and more willing to make values aligned decisions. I have a lovely organization locally that realized that a big fundraiser that they were doing really didn't align with the values of an organization, but it was a popular fundraiser for some of the donors. And so they made a really bold choice to move away from it at the risk of some donors that really preferred that type of fundraiser. But they did it in service of their organization, their values, all of that. So I really feel like this work supports making those harder choices, those bold choices. And then just improved communication, again, being able to go to someone and say, here's where I'm seeing challenges that I want to work on or improve.
Yeah, I love that story because I think there's a little bit to unpack there, as well as having the courage to say this isn't really aligned with our values. And then that's also having the courage to know the money will come. Yes. And the money will come more easily when I'm standing in my value. Right.
Oh, I need to write that down. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
It will come more easily when I'm standing in my value.
Because I think there's a little bit more to this, which is I have the courage because I know when I'm standing in my value, then people will connect with that, right? Because there's probably something about that event that never felt quite right to them, right? And that they could, but we can't cancel it, blah, blah, blah. People love it. And that's part of, in my work, courageous communication is being able to manage criticism, right? Like manage, so not be overly dependent on praise, be able so when you create that bold choice now with you or with me or whatever, you have the skills to be able to navigate when people are like, but I love that event. Like, yeah, I know we did too. And here's what's happening, right? Because that's often like, oh, I don't want to deal with that blowback, so we'll just stay status quo.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And the cost is too high.
Right. And that's how we open this, is about having these, what we, meaningful, I call them meaningful conversations, like being able to have those with those donors about some of the choices that you made. And, or having having those conversations, like having these like courageous conversations with the donors around some of the issues that impact, right? Because, I don't want to offend them because they might take the money elsewhere. And and from my perspective, and why I think what you do is so important, is that I feel like we often sometimes can perpetuate the very issues that we're trying to solve because we are afraid to talk about if we would talk about like lack of housing, but we're not willing to talk with our donors about how systemic racism impacts the lack of housing or our housing market, right? So we may be unknowingly actually continuing a problem instead of stopping it, because we're not we're not having those more complicated, nuanced conversations, because we just we're afraid to do it because we're afraid they're going to pack up their cash and go.
Yes,
and actually and I know this, it's the opposite.
Yes,
it is the opposite. You have people who are like, yes, I love it. They want you to stand for something. They want you to be grounded in your value, and and how, and so, and you have a process for helping them do that. All right, is there anything else that you want people to know about this work or what you do or why it's important?
Well, I guess I really love that you touched on values. That's one of my absolute favorite parts about the courage building work. What it comes down to is courage is observable, teachable, measurable. So if you struggle in any of those conversations that we just mentioned, you can build your skill set and you can get better at it, and you can, anchor yourself in a way that you can have more of these conversations. So it's an actual skill set is what came from Brené's work. And one of the pieces, so rumbling with vulnerability is the first component. Living into your values is the second component. So that piece that you said a minute ago of when you're grounded in your values, you are attracting the people and the work that's important to you and important to them. Super important. Braving trust is the third. And then the fourth element is a resilience piece around learning to rise. So the man in the arena quote, it is a long quote by Theodore Roosevelt, but essentially the man in the arena stumbles and falls, and it's the man in the arena that counts, not the critic. So what are you going to do? How are you going to get back up if you have that hard conversation and you lose that donor? Or you have some blowback, like you said. How are you going to get back up and keep going?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And so many of us feel like the man in the arena,
Yes.
like feel like we're carrying organizations on our backs, and so and want to create more loving, trusting
Yes.
atmospheres. All right. I just realized I forgot my opening question. So I'm going to ask my opening and closing question at the same time. I got
Okay.
out of rhythm. I went on vacation and I don't know, I left my brain in Mexico. So, all right. So my first question is, tell me something that you're really proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Yes, I heard this question last week when I was listening to your podcast, and so I got a chance to think about it. So I am really proud of the fact that people feel seen and heard in the workshops that I facilitate. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm the best facilitator or whatever, but that's something that I can stand by and say people feel seen, they feel heard, they feel safe. So I am proud of that.
That's awesome. And it's so important to create that, and so people can feel that and then internalize that and model that for others, right? We have to, we as facilitators have to create that. All right. And then my last question is, now you're a little bit north of St. Louis, you're in Quincy. We're not that far away, but if we ever wound up in a karaoke bar together, what is your go-to number?
I know. I heard that question last week and I was like, so I was born deaf. I wear 2 cochlear implants, so I cannot sing, will not sing, but I will sing along with very sing-alongable songs. So the one that came up was Bye Bye Miss American Pie.
There you go.
Very sing-alongable.
That is a very sing-alongable song.
As long as I can blend in with everybody else.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you and learning more about how the Dare to Lead program?
Yes. So go to daretoleadworkshop.com and you can find out about just the Dare to Lead work. It's a 24-hour curriculum that we walk people through, and we dig into, vulnerability, trust, values, all of that in a 24-hour format. So that's the simplest way, is daretoleadworkshop.com.
All right. And I'll have your website and your social media. You're on LinkedIn and Julie Boll Consulting.com, so people can connect with you directly as well.
Yes.
All right. You thought you might get away out of those questions, and I pulled it together at the last minute there. I got overexcited to start because I saw all the synergy here. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and helping people and teaching us just a little bit about how to create trust, and that you can do it, right?
Yes,
you can do
absolutely.
it. You can all right. And if you have not yet, you can go to theinfluentialnonprofit.com and you can pick up your Uplevel Your Influence Starter Kit. I have a lot of cool stuff in there, and I have a book called Stop Sitting Back and Start Making Change. It talks a lot about some of the topics that Julie and I talk about how to create better functioning workplaces with more grace and ease and flow. Because we all want to work in grace and ease and flow, right? And it's possible. It is possible. I feel like sometimes in nonprofit, we feel like we have to struggle. Right. There's a thing because I have to struggle, to justify your struggle. And it's actually the opposite when we create grace and ease and flow, that we allow others to have that. We don't have to sacrifice ourselves.
Right.
So that others can have, we can be the model for the change that we seek. And so all these things are so important to our self-care and to our ability. That's what I have really learned. Okay. This is so important. These relationships, trust is the foundation, feeling safe and supported. That is the absolute foundation of work. And you can't do much without that.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you don't have it, we'll help you get it. And Julie can help you get it. And so please reach out to her. This is really it for this episode of The Influential Nonprofit, and we'll see you next time.